Hi, my name's Kathy Miller and this week we're bringing the diorama to life. Yep, it's a lovely scenery diorama. It's got bushes, it's got water, it's got ice, it's all broken, it looks amazing. But you know, it's like, nah. What it really needs is some life in there. And to do that, I'm going to add some people. So I went online and I found snow people or people throwing snowballs, etc. on Thingiverse. They needed a little bit of work in Blender, a 3D program, to get them to print because the thicknesses of many of the coats and the cloaks and all this kind of stuff were just too thin. But I got them there and printed them on my 3D printer. Now these are incredibly beautiful and very nicely printed on my Anycubic Photon. And they don't need a huge amount of cleanup, but I do need to do a little bit to get rid of the little nub marks from where he had support material. And no matter what you do, you're always going to get them. Resin dust can be hazardous to your health, and people have pointed out to me I should be wet sanding. So I wet sanded these using a little bit of water on the file, and these are just fine metal files. And you just sand all the nubs off. There's not many of them, but you do need to make sure the whole lot looks nice and smooth when you're finished. I'm sadly also getting to the age where a magnifying lamp is very helpful to see things. Yeah, you will get to that age if you haven't yet. It is important not to put supports places which aren't easy to file, so you can help yourself in this process. I never put them on the face or thin areas that you can't snip them off without just breaking that area. I used a quick dab of super glue to glue each figure to its own coffee stirrer. Any stick will do. Some people prefer them vertical. I like these because they're easy to put down and weight, and then they'll stand upright. And it just gives you something to hold when you're painting, so you don't have to hold the figure itself, which may smudge paint, especially as it takes a while to dry. And now I'm just giving them a quick squirt of Tamiya fine surface primer, just to make sure that everything is nicely covered, and it's great for making sure your next coat of paint sticks. It will also highlight any issues that you might have with any nubs or support still there, so you can identify those and clean those up as well. So here we are, primer on, colours to go. Now I either brush paint with Tamiya or Vallejo, just depending whether I have the colour, and I have some lovely pinks and purples from Tamiya that I've bought at some point along the time. Depending on the paint, I find Tamiya is generally 1 coat, Vallejo is 2 at this stage, especially as we're going to add more colours on top in a bit. But all you have to do is get down a base colour and make sure every single area gets coated with the right colour paint. Watching me paint figures is probably as exciting as watching paint dry, so I'm going to whip through this stage fairly quickly. I painted the faces with Flesh and Dark Flesh by Vallejo because Vallejo has a much better range of flesh tone colours for doing figures. Now we've got a base coat of colour on, it's time to put a little bit of shading on. At this size your figures need to look real, and yes, there are folds in there, but we can bring them out and accentuate them with the paint so we can make the clothing come to life. I take the colour that I want, in this case the purple, I add a little bit of black or a little bit of white to either darken the colour or lighten the colour. I use the darkened colour in the folds to sort of highlight as almost shadows, and I use the lighter colour to highlight the high points. In this case the whole collar ended up being highlighted, and it also made it look like there was perhaps a feature on the coat there as well. I'm still using a relatively large brush at this stage, and I find it's fine for doing folds on clothes. For the man's trousers, I added sort of darker colours towards the back and slightly lighter colours on the top of his thigh where the light would be catching it. I used a pale yellow on his jacket to highlight the zip front and also the pockets. I then cracked out the fine brush. I mixed up the paler colours and darker colours and used them to highlight the real tops of lines or creases, but then you do need to blend them in with a little bit of the normal colour of, say, the leg or trouser here, otherwise they look a little bit too shiny and bright and they just stand out and look weird. Finally, we're on to my least favourite part, faces. Partly because there's so much detail on there and it's so hard to do. I tend to use a sort of a brown, a darker brown, maybe mix it with a bit of the flesh, or use it very dilute. Just put it to highlight the lips, the eye sockets, and anything else that looks like it should have a slight shadow on it. These are quite small, they're still only O scale, so I find getting faces to look realistic quite hard in this scale. It's easier to work from the deepest areas out, so I'll normally go over again then with the flesh and just catch the highlighted areas, the top of the nose and the forehead, and just make sure that they're all the right colour. So my people are done and I just sprayed them with some matte clear sealant, just an acrylic one by Plastic Coat, and it works quite well. And I can just, you can see I just pop them off. The glue isn't particularly solid. It's still a bit shiny on a boot, but that's fine, I can cope with shiny boots. Now there's two things I need to do. I need to add a snowball and I need to add a massive snowman's head or something and glue them onto the diorama. I worked out the best place to put my woman. I did feel she needed to be somewhere with a few footprints already so that she didn't look like she was standing in pristine snow. This piece of snow was previously done with AK Interactive Terrain Snow, so I used that to add another layer just on top so I could put her feet into it as if she was standing in the snow rather than just plunked on top. So I did a nice smooth layer and then I used the thick crusty bits on the side where it's dried since I did this first bit of the diorama, and I used them to create a ball. I just put my girl in place and hope the snow will be solid enough to hold her. I suspect it will be. Then I used a finger dipped in water just to smooth some of my little peaks out, because I want this to look like rolled snow, and the water stops the snow sticking to your hand. Likewise, a damp paintbrush can be used just to smooth out the snow that we've added so it feathers nicely into the surrounding snow we've already done. Finally, a coat of micro balloons just to make sure that everything ties in. A blob of white paint on the man's snowball and a few little sprinklings of micro balloons sorted him out, and then I put some white glue on his feet, propped him up on a pot so that he wouldn't fall over, and left him to dry. Well, it's finished! Yep, I've been doing snow and ice all year, and finally everything's on. So at this point in a project, I like to do a few learning points, because let's face it, we can all build dioramas. The trick is to improve each time we build them, and this is my second diorama on snow and ice I did one for MRVP too. So what did I learn? I need to look at the prototype photos a lot. I don't actually live somewhere where there's a lot of snow and ice, so it's easy to have a perception of what snow and ice looks like rather than what it really looks like. So I didn't put any leaves on the brambles because I thought, oh, no leaves on trees in the winter. But actually, there are leaves on brambles in the winter in the UK because it doesn't get cold enough here that they've all lost their leaves. Secondly, I guess I had a lot of learning points on using disparate materials in a diorama, partly because it's a demonstration diorama, so I used little bits here with hairspray. And over time they've kind of blended in, but at the time they looked very yellow because hairspray has a little bit of a yellow tone. Third thing, I tried a lot of new techniques and I learned things. So I would never trace around the outside of my ice diorama and leave the Sharpie there again. Because when you pour the resin in, the Sharpie transfers to the ice. So a lot of this ice here has little black lines on it. Not ideal. I did really enjoy learning new things though, and that to me is the point of everything. So I designed and 3D printed the gates, which came out really well, and the paddles. I spent a lot of time measuring the real thing, so that paying attention to the prototype paid off, and I'm lucky enough that I can just pop out here. I have a mum who is happy to write all the measurements down while I stand there with a tape measure, and I took 1 million photos. But I look at it now and I just think, I dripped some resin there. I probably should cover that up. This path, I spent a lot of time putting brown under it, but then it didn't really show through. The brickwork worked well. But, you know, actually the edges need a bit of thought because I can look at those and see actually some of those edges still show through. So I'm showing all the pictures here that you wouldn't normally see on a diorama. And it's to show that even people who do a lot of dioramas still have learning points they have to learn. So if you're doing a diorama and it doesn't come out quite as you want it, don't worry, that's the same for everybody. The trick is to learn from it and your next diorama will be even better. Well, I've had great fun doing snow and ice, and if you have too, please let me know in the comments, because it's great to know that people find these videos useful. So thank you to all my patrons who support me, and if you'd like to support me, pop on over to my Patreon page and do so. And next year, we'll be coming up with something that doesn't have any snow and ice in it all year, I promise.